The phone rang loudly in the quiet night, but no one answered. It was the night of November 24th, 2017, in the bustling downtown of Toronto, a seemingly normal night, but marking the beginning of an unpredictable tragedy. Tess Richey, a 22-year-old young woman, full of ambition and dreams, had just arrived in Toronto with a desire to pursue a career in aviation. That night, Tess and her friends enjoyed happy hours at a bar. No one expected that it would be the last time they saw her alive. As the night fell, Tess's unanswered messages and unusual absence sowed anxiety in the hearts of her loved ones. A feeling of unease crept in, signaling that something was wrong. The mysterious disappearance of Tess Richey sets off a desperate search, revealing the dark underbelly of a modern metropolis. On the night of November 24th, 2017, the chilly air of Toronto enveloped Tess Richey and her friends as they left a bar. After parting ways with the group, Tess came across a strange man. Security camera footage, albeit blurry, captured the two walking together, leaving the busy area and heading down a deserted alley. What seemed like a fleeting encounter was in fact the beginning of a terrifying chain of events. They walked a few blocks together through less frequented streets until they approached an abandoned construction site. It was here that Tess's interaction with the man took a strange turn. There were no obvious signs from the outside that foreshadowed the tragedy that was about to strike. Everything happened silently, like a ghost in the dark. The stranger, Kalen Schlatter, a name that would later be associated with a heinous crime, led Tess to a hidden corner. What happened in those few minutes, no one could know exactly except those involved. This area, which was rarely visited at night, became the perfect setting for the crime. There were no direct witnesses, not a single eye watching. Kalen Schlatter acted brutally and quickly. Tess, alone and unsuspecting, was unable to resist. The strangulation ended her young life tragically. After committing the crime, Schlatter abandoned Tess's body in a narrow alley nearby and disappeared into the darkness, trying to erase all traces. Tess Richey's sudden and tragic death has forever haunted the city of Toronto, turning an ordinary night into an indelible stain on its criminal history. On the morning of November 29th, 2017, 5 days after Tess Richey went missing, a somber atmosphere hung over Toronto. A mother's hunch prompted Virginia Richey and her daughter Rachel to search for her. In a dark alley near Yonge and Dundas, Virginia's heart sank as she discovered Tess's lifeless body in a narrow, out-of-sight crevice. The mother's anguished screams tore through the silence. An emergency 911 call was made, and shortly thereafter, police cars arrived at the scene. They witnessed a haunting scene, Tess's body lying in an awkward position, roughly concealed. However, what was remarkable was that the scene showed no signs of a violent struggle or ransacking. Everything was eerily quiet. This created a confusing and contradictory picture for investigators. Although there were initial witnesses who said they saw Tess with a man on the night of her disappearance, and their statements were taken, at the time, no one could have guessed that these initial pieces of information, even if they were only vague, would be the first and most important clue that would take the investigation in a completely different direction and seal the fate of a criminal. The scene showed no signs of a robbery or break-in, making the story even more complicated and confusing for investigators. As the forensic team and professional investigators approached the scene, the mystery began to unravel. Tess Richey's body was found in a remote area, hidden behind bushes and debris, as if in a desperate attempt to conceal the crime. The first thing that struck investigators was the lack of a violent struggle on the ground or any disturbance of furniture. The subsequent autopsy painted a grimmer picture. The medical examiner's report confirmed that Tess had died from asphyxiation, specifically compression of the neck. However, this was strangely inconsistent with the crime scene, where there were no obvious signs of a struggle significant enough to cause such a death. The injuries on Tess's body were not many, but there were some notable points. In particular, a small detail on the victim's wrist turned the entire investigation in a completely different direction. Those faint scratches suggested that the attack could have been sudden and quick, or that the victim had been restrained before the attack. In addition, forensic experts found other traces, although small, extremely important. A small amount of organic matter was collected under Tess's fingernails. This could be a direct clue from the attacker, an invisible trace but carrying a huge weight of evidence. There were no strange toxins in Tess's system, eliminating the possibility that she was drugged. This further strengthened the hypothesis of a sudden and direct attack, where the perpetrator took advantage of the element of surprise to restrain the victim. Every little detail at the scene, from the way the body was placed, to the faint marks on the wrist, to the debris under the fingernails, are important pieces that help the police reconstruct that terrible night. They are whispers from the darkness, revealing the truth about how Tess Richey was murdered, and gradually leading the investigation closer to the killer. With only a handful of haunting clues from the crime scene and autopsy results, Toronto police investigators immediately embarked on a race against time. A task force was formed, made up of some of the most experienced homicide detectives. The first step was to narrow down the possible suspects. Police combed through lists of friends and acquaintances, paying particular attention to individuals who had appeared suspiciously in the area where Tess disappeared. Dozens of interviews were conducted. Particular attention was paid to a strange man who was caught on security camera footage with Tess. His image was widely released. Then something unexpected happened. Kalen Schlatter, a 21-year-old man, contacted the police himself, admitting that he was the man in the video. This move, which at first glance seemed like cooperation, raised a subtle suspicion among experienced detectives. Why would an innocent person turn himself in when the image was not clear enough to identify him? When questioned, Schlatter gave a seemingly plausible but too perfect explanation. He and Tess had parted ways and gone in different directions after leaving the camera's view. He insisted that he had nothing to do with her disappearance or death. Schlatter's statement, though calm and coherent, contained unnatural repetitions that seemed staged. Experienced investigators noted the unusual way he recounted each step in each sentence, as if he were trying to memorize a script rather than recount an event that had actually happened. Schlatter's suspicious composure, in stark contrast to someone who had just come into contact with the victim of a horrific crime, further aroused suspicion. The detectives decided to employ intensive interrogation tactics. They did not directly accuse him, but instead asked open-ended questions, watching Schlatter's every gesture, look, and reaction. They focused on small holes in his story, slowly building psychological pressure. Under the harsh light of the interrogation room, every lie, every little tension could not escape the investigators' keen eyes. Schlatter remained surprisingly calm, another warning sign that he had probably prepared very carefully for this confrontation. While the interrogation was going on, forensic experts were working tirelessly. From the security camera footage, they were able to extract a DNA sample from the water bottle that Schlatter had discarded near the scene. The DNA analysis results matched perfectly with organic material found under Tess Richey's fingernails, an undeniable scientific proof. This confirmed that there had been physical contact between Tess and Schlatter in the final moments of her life, a fact that completely destroyed his initial story. It was clear that his story about breaking up with Tess was a complete lie. He had been by her side until the very end. With the DNA evidence in hand, the police turned the tables in the interrogation room. They stopped asking probing questions and started presenting concrete evidence, from security camera footage showing Schlatter and Tess's route to detailed forensic results. Faced with the undeniable truth, Schlatter's demeanor began to change. From his initial calmness, he gradually became restless. His words began to stammer and contradict. He tried to change his testimony, trying to explain the presence of DNA, but all justifications became weak before the weight of science. The investigation did not stop there. To solidify the case and clarify Kalen Schlatter's motives and intentions, the investigators decided to use a special tactic, an undercover police operation in the prison cell, commonly known as Mr. Big in Canada. A police officer posing as a prisoner was placed in the same cell as Schlatter, with the aim of extracting any information he might inadvertently reveal. This was a tense period, requiring great patience and tact from the undercover officer. Through daily conversations pretending to be an experienced criminal, the officer gradually built up Schlotter's trust. During this process, Schlotter, perhaps out of loneliness or a desire to show off, began to reveal startling details. He referred to the Tess Richey case himself, sometimes with indifference, sometimes with a frightening lack of remorse. Among the most remarkable statements was how he disposed of the body, tried to cover up the evidence, and how he thought he was smart enough to avoid being caught. Schlotter even described in detail how he had squeezed Tess's neck and her surprise when she was attacked. He spoke of Tess's surprise, suggesting she was unprepared or defenseless. These carefully recorded statements provided invaluable psychological evidence, revealing a cold, calculating mind and a complete lack of remorse. Kalin Schlotter's case file grew as solid as a steel wall. From the incontrovertible DNA evidence to the confessions from his cell and the perfect match of the surveillance footage, every piece of the puzzle pointed in a single direction. Even Schlotter's initial statements, once considered cooperative, now became his strongest evidence as the scientific evidence and confessions from his cell were contradicted. He tried to create a false narrative, but his overconfidence and lack of compassion led him to be caught. Finally, early one morning, Kalin Schlotter was arrested. The arrest warrant was issued after the case had been solidified. He was initially charged with second-degree murder, but as further investigation revealed the perpetrator's intentions and calculations through confessions in the cell, the charge was upgraded to first-degree murder, reflecting the severity and brutality of the crime, which was calculated and intentional in taking life. A small, invisible detail from the scene became the thread that led the police to uncover the whole truth, bringing the murderer to justice. With irrefutable evidence gathered, Tess Richey's case finally came to trial. Kalin Schlotter's trial attracted great public attention, becoming the focus of newspapers and news channels, reflecting society's deep concern for justice. Tess's family, with endless grief but full of resilience, was always present in the court, seeking justice for their lost loved one. At the trial, Kalin Schlotter, facing serious charges, maintained her initial deceitful attitude, trying to refute the evidence. His defense attorneys tried to sow doubt, focusing on what they considered to be shortcomings in the investigation or trying to minimize Schlotter's role in Tess's death. However, their arguments ran into a solid wall of scientific evidence and shocking testimony. The prosecution presented a powerful and convincing case, gradually exposing Schlotter's crimes. They replayed security camera footage, detailed the undeniable DNA evidence found under Tess's fingernails, and especially played recordings of Schlotter's confession from the undercover police operation in the cell. These statements, directly from the killer's mouth, shocked the entire courtroom. The sound of Schlotter's cold voice describing the murder sent shivers down the spines of many, leaving no doubt about the brutality of the crime. The defense tried to argue that Schlotter did not intend to kill in the first place, or that the act was impulsive. But the prosecutor countered that argument by pointing to details in his confession that showed calculation and subsequent attempts to destroy evidence, a clear demonstration of intent and cruelty. After several days of intense trial, with emotional testimony from Tess's family and overwhelming evidence, the jury returned a verdict. On March 23, 2020, Kalin Schlotter was convicted of first-degree murder. His final sentence was life in prison, with no possibility of parole for 25 years. The verdict came as a huge relief to the Richey family and the public. The courtroom was filled with sighs of relief and the cries of family members. Although the verdict could not bring Tess back, it did confirm that justice had been served. Tess Richey's case was brought to a close with a harsh sentence, a stark warning to those who disregard human life, and a powerful message about the persistence of the legal system in finding and punishing criminals. The loss of Tess Richey left an indelible scar on her family and the Toronto community. A young girl full of dreams was brutally taken from her. The pain of the mother who found her daughter herself is the clearest testament to the terrible loss caused by the crime. From Tess's tragedy, a powerful message resonated in society: the importance of vigilance and the indispensable role of surveillance technology in modern forensic science. It was the grainy camera footage in DNA evidence that became the strongest voice denouncing the perpetrator, proving that no crime can be completely hidden. The case also prompted positive changes in the way police handle missing person reports. Although Kaylin Schlatter has been sentenced to life in prison, the question remains, is this sentence enough to compensate for the life lost and the pain the victim's family has suffered? The Tess Richey case will forever be a reminder of the dark underbelly of society and the importance of vigilance and justice. Is this sentence enough to compensate for the life lost and the pain the victim's family has suffered?